Hall, a man who established the exhibit in the Robarts Library back in May, and who will be putting a yet larger exhibit in the Robarts Library in December. He's put a great deal of effort into this program, and is himself very knowledgeable on the art and literature of Tagore. Niladri Chaki, please take over and introduce the member.
Let me give you an observation. This is International Peace Year, declared by the United Nations, and at the same time, this is the 125th anniversary of Rabindranath Tagore. Mere coincidence, but they complement each other. Now, we are beginning the session here, Tagore Visual Arts, Window to the Soul. Lecture and discussion of this session will be on Tagore's creativity on visual arts, mainly his painting. It could be a little bit strange when you hear a Nobel laureate poet became a successful painter. But this is not an unusual event in the world of art and literature. But what is unusual is that Tagore started painting at the age of 70 and produced more than 2,500 paintings and sketches during the last few years of his life. Tagore's nephew, Rabindranath, who is one of the pioneers in the field of modern Indian paintings, described this phenomenon as a volcanic eruption. That was not an overstatement, but that eruption was not a sudden one. As a matter of fact, we see in his writing in 1924 that preparation of the phase was going on in Tagore's mind for a long time. He wrote in his writing, "In the inner recesses of my heart, inarticulate sounds of grief, innumerable and strange, move in unformed darkness, seeking a form and a shelter." Because of the fact that Tagore never had any academic training in painting and was completely self-taught, his style was unique. Critics may find some primitive instinct in his painting. If we go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, they have a large collection of primitive art. There we may find some similarity between some of the objects there with paintings of Tagore. But whatever primitive instinct we find in Tagore's painting, it came through a refined way. It came through Tagorean intellects and thoughts. In 1930, during his exhibition in Europe and other parts, and especially in Germany, an art critic wrote in a newspaper in Berlin that, quote, "New visions are seized in his painting that descend to the depth, to the origin, of which the reality of the world is only a feeble copy, reflected light," unquote. We have the same feelings when you go to see the largest collections of Tagore paintings in Rabindra Bhavan, Archives and Museum of Vishwabharati, and University founded by Tagore. And we are really simply amazed when we discover the Tagore's world of painting. There we can see ever unseen animals, the nature with unearthly colors. An old man is stretching his hands towards a dark cave, and strange human faces with piercing eyes which haunt you beyond the limit of the exhibition. Sometimes we have a chilling effect on our back. I don't know whether I'm allowed to make this statement here, that sometimes we have the same experience when you see the paintings of Lauren Harris, of Canadian Group of Seven, especially in his painting like Baffin Islands, ice house, above the Lake Superior, and so on. We are truly blessed with the enormous amount of literary works of Tagore. And his poetry, his novels, short stories, dramas, dance dramas, and essays, collection of letters, and finally his nearly 2,100 songs, which influence our lives, which gives us inspiration and hope at a time when we are destitute. But when Tagore gave us his painting, another world of Tagore ever unseen unfolded to us. And now, through his paintings, we come to know how this world was reflected in his eyes, what he felt about the nature, the season, and what he discovered in the human faces who are around us in our everyday life. Going through his painting is an act of discovery. Some critics say Tagore wanted to say something in his painting which he couldn't say in his literary work. I'm not able to assess or judge the statement. Our speaker, Professor Dr. Somendranath Bandyopadhyay, is the best-known authority in the field of Tagore paintings. Not mentioning his numerous research papers in different prominent journals, his large book, Rabindra Chitrashikala and Rabindra Sahitya Patavamika, Tagore's painting, with a special reference to his literature, earned him award and acclamation from all quarters. Beside this book, there are quite a number of books too. Among them, the books on Tagore literature, Bowls of Bengal, and Ramkinkar, the well-known sculptor. Presently, he is a professor of Bengali language and literature of Vishwabharati and specializing on Tagore. Now, Professor Thakkar told everything about him last night, so I have nothing to say anymore. But only let me tell you something. It was the chill evening of 1977 when I met him first. And the same night, he showed us his precious collections of slides of Tagore paintings and gave an enchanting narration. Since then, I am a keen reader of his work. And before I end, let me tell you, from the very first day, I was simply charmed with his pleasant personality, which I will never be able to match. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Bandyopadhyay.
Namaskar. Respected friends, I'm so happy to have this opportunity to talk about Rabindranath Tagore's paintings this morning. I thank the members of the Tagore Lectureship Foundation for inviting me to give a talk on my favorite subject. I thank you all. Poet Tagore, as we all know, was also reputed as a playwright, composer of songs, philosopher, educator, short story and novel writer, and so on and on. But very few of us, well, even today, know that he was a painter too, and a great painter to my mind. Now this, I think, is partly because Tagore took to painting late, very late, almost at the fag end of his life. But it's also because Vishwabharati has not yet been able to publish his paintings properly. There are only 2 volumes published by Vishwabharati and 1 by Delhi Lalit Kala Academy. But all these volumes are out of print now. It's very sad, really. Tagore, as I've said, took to painting late. In 1924, when he was above 60, 63, he started painting. Well, actually, in 24, we didn't get painting. He did some scribbles or doodles. Let me explain. Out of the corrections or erasers in the manuscript, well, emerged certain forms which inspired the artist in the poet. Now, I don't mean to say that we find these scribbles in 1924 manuscripts only. No, certainly not. In earlier manuscripts, we find the same thing, crisscross of lines by way of corrections taking shape. And even in the earliest manuscript published, 1878, when Tagore was 17 only, Maluti Puthi is the name of that manuscript. We find these sort of lines taking shape, these erasers, these corrections. But 1924 is very important. I'll come to that later in detail, into details. But let me say that 1924 is very important. 24-25 is the period of his famous writings, the book of poem Puravi. You all know the name, many of you know the name Puravi. Some of the poems were written in Latin America, Argentina, Buenos Aires, when Tagore was staying there as a guest of Victoria Ocampo, the famous lady who did much for Tagore. I'll come to that later. Now, in this manuscript, Puravi occupies a very important place in the history of Tagore's poetry. But it is equally important, or I should say, more important in the history of Tagore's paintings, inasmuch as in this manuscript, Puravi manuscript, we find scribblings, these corrections, erasers, peculiar erasers. I have brought a few today. I'll show them. And quite a lot of them, many scribbles, peculiar designs emerging out of corrections. Now, this is very important. Through these corrections, through these crisscross of lines, Tagore invented his own, let me underline own, his own technique of painting. Tagore is a self-taught artist. I don't mean to say that he didn't study. He studied, but in his own way. He didn't go to any school or art college. But he definitely studied. He saw a great deal. He observed nature. His eyes were very keen. He saw the famous works of the artists of the world. He for the first time visited France at the age of 18 or 20. He went to France to visit all the galleries there. But again he went there, and for a longer time saw almost all the famous works preserved in the West, in Germany, in France, in England, and in many other museums. went to Japan to see the Japanese art treasure. And it is more important, I think, he came in contact with famous artists of the world. I'll just give you a few names. At Shantiniketan, he brought Nandalal Bose, one of the leading artists. His nephew in Jorashaka House, there was Rabindranath Tagore, his nephew, a master painter, founder of the New Bengal School. And then Rabindranath Tagore also was there. So Jorashaka House was full of artists. But then he met Japanese artists, Chinese artists like Yu Pion, Nicholas Roerich of Soviet Russia, Rothenstein of England, and then many, many artists, Jacob Epstein, Stanislaw Żuklewski, Czechoslovakia, Henry Moore, and so on. Now, these things had a lot of impact on him. The preparation was going on in the background, and suddenly it came out after 1924, just like a volcanic eruption. Now, at the beginning, we find these lines in the pages of manuscript, in the manuscripts of Purubi and other books of poems, short stories, novels, and so on. But gradually, his lines ceased to be mere byproduct of literature. They got their separate existence, and the result was simply surprising. Tagore produced more than 2,000 paintings, drawings and paintings. Or to be more precise, let me say, nearly 2,500 paintings. The number of his songs, he has written and composed so many songs, a great number of songs, more than 2,000. But the number of the paintings exceeds that, 2,500. Now, so far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen all the paintings. It's not possible, because there are some private collections even today. But I've seen 1,700 paintings at Shantiniketan and in Bengal. We have in our Vishwabharati Museum more than 1,600 paintings. In Calcutta, Academy of Fine Arts, Birla Art Museum, and Rabindra Bharati Society, they have a good collection. In Delhi, they have a very good collection. I saw 21 paintings collected by Dartington Hall of Leonard Elmhurst in England, Devonshire. They have a very good collection, 21 paintings purchased by Elmhurst from Rohidar Tagore's son. And I've seen some private collections also. So my number would be nearly 2,300 or something like that. 200 maybe I haven't seen. My experience is based on these 2,700, 300 paintings, 1,300 paintings. Now, 2,300 paintings. Now, in our Rabindra Museum, we have preserved them, collected them, classified them according to size also, small, medium, large, extra large, and so on. Now, Tagore did paintings depicting different themes, namely birds and animals, landscape, human figure, portraits, self-portraits, some abstract forms also. I'll come to that. Now, what is very important in the history of Indian painting is this. Tagore has brought modernity in the realm of Indian painting. Now, it requires a lot of discussion, a lot of time to go into details. I'm not going into details now, but just in brief, I must say that Tagore is a modern painter, and he has brought modernity in the realm of Indian painting, inasmuch as it is Tagore who, for the first time, detached painting from the bondage of known literary themes. Let me explain. Previously, we had in our past days paintings, famous painters, master painters, who mainly depicted, or they liked depicting known themes, either mythological stories or historical stories or literary stories. In Ajanta, we have, many of you have seen the fresco paintings of Ajanta. The Ajanta artists, they depicted Buddhist stories, life of the Buddha and so on. The Rajput painters took up Radha Krishna love theme. That was their subject. The Mughal painters depicted historical stories, historical figures. Tagore's contemporary, Rabindranath Tagore, preferred Muslim ruler stories, sometimes other romantic themes. Nandalal Bose was fond of mythological stories especially. But here's an artist, Tagore, who detached painting from known literary association. And this is very important. We know everywhere in the world today, modernity has come with this new change. Well, I don't mean to say, let me tell you clearly, that illustration, I don't mean to say that illustration is not good art. In fact, some of the best painters of the world were illustrators. Michelangelo, Raphael, in our country, Ajanta artists, Rajput painters, they were illustrators. Rabindranath Tagore, Nandalal. So illustration is a bad type of art, I don't mean to say that at all. But Tagore brought modernity in the sense it has come in the West. This is new also, this is the new tendency also in the West. The French painters, the German painters belong to the 18th century. They brought these new things, and from there, from these works, new tendencies have come, and this is what is modernity. But there are other symptoms, other proofs of modernity. I will come to that later when I talk about, when I see the paintings, show you the paintings and explain, try to comment on the paintings, on color and on other important features of the paintings. But this is one of the most important aspects of painting, modern painting. It is a little away from known literary themes. It is not illustration. And the second importance to us, the students of Tagore's literature, is very important, to me at least, very much. These paintings help us much, I should say very, very much, to understand his literature, especially the later phase of his literature, 1924 to 1941. These I mean, the literary works of this period, all the works, poems, plays, novels, stories, were much influenced by his paintings. Or I should better say, Tagore the writer was influenced by Tagore the painter. Let us now see the paintings and let the paintings speak for themselves. But before that, let me quote the Bowls of Bengal. The Bowls, many of you, I hope, know the Bowls of Bengal. They're kind of philosopher singers. They play one-stringed instrument, which they call aktara. This is very symbolic. One-stringed instrument. They are after one, the supreme one, whom they call the man of my heart. Now these Bowls, they follow their own path of sadhana, religious practice. About their sadhana, the Baul says, I follow my own path. This is not, my path is not bitten by anybody else. It is covered with grass, that is, it is not bitten by anybody else. Now, I would like to say that like the Bowls of Bengal, Tagore could also say, I follow my own path. It isn't bitten by anybody else. It is covered with grass. Let us now see the paintings and let the paintings speak for themselves. I'll try to comment here and there, and I hope my commentary will help you to appreciate his paintings. I don't want to explain the paintings. Paintings are not to be explained. They have no, they don't really mean anything. They represent life. They reveal the life. But here and there I'll make some comments. I'm beginning at the very beginning, that is 1924. First one, please. No, the first one. This, I think, is the third or fifth. Is it all right?
Yeah.
In 1930, when Tagore came to Europe with his paintings for the first time, he said, I'm just quoting him, now I'm here. My mission this time is different. Now I'm here as a painter. Now here is Tagore, the painter. This is a bit reverse, left and right. Anyway, Tagore is painting. This was not, let me tell you, this painting was not a hobby or a plaything for him. For the last few years, nearly 18 years, he was sometimes wholly occupied by this new form of creation, which virtually took possession of him, and once begun, left him no peace until they were finished. A page from Purabi, this is also reverse, I mean right and left. Anyway, this is a page from Purabi manuscript, 1924. Now these lines attracted the attention of the famous lady, I've already mentioned her name, Victoria Ocampo, when Tagore spent a few days there. She used to regularly take photograph of these manuscript pages. It is she who for the first time attached importance to this manuscript. We are grateful to her, Victoria Ocampo. Another page from Purabi. You see, the designs are getting more and more complex. The lines are getting more and more complex, the designs are heavier. And we have so many of them, almost in every page. Another page from the same manuscript, Purabi. This rhythmic line especially attract us. Tagore, we all know, knew what rhythm is as a composer of poems, songs. It was there, bred in his bone. And so when he took up painting, it automatically came. Critics of the world sometimes are not of the same opinion. They differ. But on one point, they all agree that in Tagore's paintings we find these wonderful rhythmic lines. They don't have any disagreement on this very point. Another page from the same book, Purabi. Now, as you have seen, the previous, in two of the previous, or three of the previous designs, they were mostly abstract in nature. That is, these lines don't represent anything we see in nature. But here is something different. The lines are taking shape, and we find a human body, a human head, long hair, legs, and so on. Now gradually these abstract forms are coming closer to nature. I can say that Tagore started as an artist. He started as an abstractionist. But then he gradually came to life, things in nature. So gradually he's coming to things we find in nature. This is not our... His lines leave the pages of manuscript, but it is apparent, it is quite obvious that this is very close to the designs of the manuscripts, the ordinary corrections. It's very close to them. I said that Tagore invented his own technique of painting through these crisscross of lines in the pages of manuscript. Beautiful golden yellow, one of the most favorite palettes of Tagore. I'll come to that later also. We'll find many paintings with the same color, golden yellow, the color of autumn sky of Bengal, golden yellow. This is a kind of, Tagore calls it a Jolopatro, water jug, designed for his daughter-in-law, Rothida's wife, Pratima Devi. In one of his letters, he said, "I'm sending you a design of a Jolopatro. I hope you like it." Now, what is very interesting, we'll come to other paintings also, we'll see the same thing. In Tagore's paintings, we find mostly a lighted background against which the things are placed, and they are dark. This is one of the peculiarities of Tagore's paintings, one of the main special features of Tagore's paintings, in landscape, in human figure, and so on. In almost all the almost all the branches, you'll find the same thing: a lighted background and things depicted against it. Now we come to nature. Birds and animals, they belong to the first phase of Tagore's paintings. This is a small painting, not very big, but it has what the critics say. It has a monumental quality. It looks bigger, much bigger. A quadruped, not a dog nor a tiger, an imaginary animal. Most of the animals and birds belong to the dreamland. They don't belong to the zoo or forest. They belong to the dreamland. Now here, I'll just place before you, I'd ask you to note some of the peculiarities of Tagore's paintings so far as technique is concerned. Now, here you find a part of the body is left. It is outside the canvas, and that is not without purpose. It makes the thing depicted more forceful. Tagore has intentionally left half of the body outside the canvas. This is what he does many times. Another bird with a wonderful beak and eyes, an eye with a dark background. Here it is a little different, reverse. The spirit of the bird is there. Tagore is not interested in anatomy. He was never interested in anatomy or superficial reality of things. It is animation which he wanted to reveal everywhere, in birds and animals, in landscape, in human figures, and so on. Victoria Ocampo, who for the first time, as I have told you, attached importance to these manuscript pages of Purubi, took photograph of almost all the pages. It is Victoria Ocampo who spent a lot of money for arranging an exhibition of paintings for the first time in Europe, in France. You know how expensive it is to arrange an exhibition there. And it was done within a very short period of time. She did everything. And in Galerie Pigalle, or Pigalle Gallery, Tagore held his first exhibition in Europe. I had the fortune to visit that Galerie Pigalle. I brought many documents from France. Some of the newspaper cuttings helped me much. I have published them, translating them into Bengali. Some paper cuttings, French paper cuttings, reviewing Tagore's paintings, Tagore's drawings. So France and exhibition in France is a sort of landmark in Tagore's paintings, in the sense that we get only birds and animals. Tagore didn't take any landscape with him. Landscape belongs to the second phase of Tagore's paintings. Now we'll come to the second phase, that is landscape, after his exhibitions in France. Well, Tagore is going to attend the opening ceremony of his exhibition in Moscow, Soviet Russia. Professor Petrov was there Tagore is getting down at the street from the car. People they are all interested in his personality and his painting. They have gathered together. After a few minutes, his exhibition will be opened by Professor Petrov. Moscow, 1930. Landscape in black and white, but gradually colors will follow. Here again, lighted background and things depicted on against it are dark. Tagore, we know, visited and revisited many parts of the world. He went to almost all the countries of Europe, came to America, visited China and Japan, Persia, Ceylon, and so on. Many times. But what is surprising, so far as his paintings are concerned, his landscapes, he has rarely crossed the boundary of Bengal. The landscapes depicted by him mostly are Bengal landscape, either East Bengal or West Bengal. They are not direct sketches. Tagore was not at all fond of sketching directly, but they are based on memory. They are from memory. Either memory of Shilaidaho, the East Bengal villages on the river Padma, and others are Shantiniketan landscapes, Birbhum landscape, West Bengal. They differ fundamentally. East Bengal is comparatively green, and Shantiniketan at that time was very rugged, dry, red soil, eroded soil. We call it Kwai. Very beautiful indeed, red waves. We'll come to that. Landscape. The trees against a lighted background. I think it is based on memory of his visit to Darjeeling or Kalimpong. This is, you all know, it belongs to Van Gogh, the famous artist of Netherlands. Tagore, I have intentionally brought it here. Tagore was fond of Van Gogh. He liked very much, and collected many of Van Gogh's prints. And I should like to add, Tagore didn't have any academic training. He didn't follow any tradition. He didn't try to copy anybody. The only exception is Van Gogh. Tagore once copied Van Gogh's work, and this is the painting which Tagore copied. But this is not a copy, this is by Van Gogh. Tagore copied this famous painting by Van Gogh. Here the background is lighted, but I can add, it looks like a hidden light behind this canvas. I'm reminded of what an art critic said about the famous French painter Rouault. I'm just quoting the critics saying, critics comment. Often these hues seem to vibrate with light from a source behind the painting. Now this is equally true here. This is applicable to Tagore's paintings also. Often these hues seem to vibrate with light from a source behind the painting. East Bengal landscape, a part of the temple, I think, is seen. Architecture appears sometimes here and there. This is one of the examples. Now look at the composition of the of the painting. Tagore has, as I've said, went to Japan. He was fond of Japanese paintings and painters. When Vishwabhati was suffering, Shantidharan was suffering from financial difficulty, extremely. At that time, Tagore brought some of the Japanese painters as teachers of Shantiniketan and purchased a few wonderful Japanese paintings, took them to Shantiniketan. Now, what I would like to say, there was an impact of Japanese painting on Tagore. I don't mean to say that he copied Japanese paintings or it's very obvious, no, but he learned something from Japanese paintings, and that is the composition, the use of space, I should say, use of space, sometimes leaving blank space. I'll come to that. I think I have brought a few empty space, depicting only something at the corner, as Japanese painters mostly do. This is, I think, the garden of Jorashako House when he was a boy. If you go through his autobiography, Jivan Sriti, my boyhood, my reminiscences, you'll find a description of the garden in his book. Now, this painting reminds us of the description in his autobiography, Jivan Sriti. It has been translated into English. Wonderful landscape, especially the color. The sky of Bengal, the lighted sky of the morning, of noon, or sometimes evening when it is darkening. In Tagore's paintings you find mostly these times, morning, noon, evening, that is dusk. In one of his famous songs, you know that many of us, most of the Bengalis, they know this famous song. He says, Chirodin tomar akash, tomar batash, amar prane bajay bashi. Now, these paintings show how true it is. The Bengali sky, the atmosphere of Bengal, the atmosphere of Bengal landscape. Evening is coming. The reflected light on the pond is wonderful, really. The dark trees against lighted background. Sky, sometimes it's not always sky. Here it is sky, but lighted background doesn't necessarily mean the sky only. Lighted things, lighted background may not be skies always. One of the there is a fungus here. There are fungus spots. It's very difficult, you see, in our country to preserve things. The moisture is there, dust, and so on. So it's very difficult. But this is one of the most famous landscapes done by Tagore. And this painting was published later in almost all the papers of the West, in Russia, in France, in Germany. I would like to add that Tagore, as a landscape painter, can be placed with the first-rate landscape painters of the world. This is not my opinion. I am just quoting the art critics and artists, some of the famous artists of the world. Let us now come to the flowers. We come closer to nature. Here also Tagore is not at all interested in anatomy. He's fond of revealing depicting, he's not fond of depicting superficial reality of things, but he wants to go deep into the very spirit of nature. There's a flower vase done with pen and ink. You know, it takes a lot of time. It has taken a lot of time. Tagore was very, very busy doing all sorts of things. This is very surprising. When he was too busy, he did all these things. At Shantiniketan, he was busy with his university. He had to go for collecting money to different parts of India. He had to sometimes beg from door to door for the fund of the institution. And he fell ill also. His health was broken. He was overburdened with responsibilities at Shantiniketan and outside it. But at that time, these paintings were produced, which took a lot of time. Flower. Now we come to human figures. Human figure is one of the most interesting things to the artists. The artists of the world are fond of depicting human body, as you all know, the most exciting field in the realm of art. Now this painting, the first one, it has a stamp of what they call in the West expressionism. It developed in Germany first, then it came to France. Other movements took shape in France first, Impressionism, Post-Impressionism and so on. But Expressionism originated in Germany. It was not appreciated by French artists or art critics at the beginning, but later it was appreciated, and now they attach much importance to Expressionism. In French art galleries, they have preserved many Expressionist painters. Now Tagore is very close to that Expressionist group of painters of the West. Well, I don't want to say that he was an Expressionist artist. No, all his paintings are not expressionistic, I mean in the narrow sense of the word. But some of his paintings are very, very close to German Expressionism. And some of his paintings are very close to the paintings done by a few German artists. I'll come to that later. I'm just naming one, Emil Nolde. You know his name, he's a famous Expressionist artist of Germany, Emil Nolde. He has painted landscapes, wonderful landscapes and human face. When Tagore took his paintings to Germany for the first time in 1930, most of the German critics said that Tagore is very close to Emil Nolde. This is, as you all know, Edvard Munch of Norway. This painting brought a new wave in the realm of Western painting, namely Expressionism. Edvard Munch. Tagore's paintings. Human figure. Now what is interesting here, the expression of the mood. Tagore is most interested in these moods of either women or men. One thing I didn't point out earlier, in landscape paintings also we find the same thing. This use of what they call texture. Not that Tagore was not interested in applying flat colors. He did use flat colors, but mostly he is fond of using this play of texture in his paintings. Even drawings also we find the same. In drawings also we find the same thing. texture with dots and addings. It's full of texture. It holds the whole thing within the canvas. Now this texture is not something new in the realm of art. We know it was there in our folk art, Bengal folk art, or in Tibetan art. In the West also we find the same thing in Van Gogh. Van Gogh is famous for his display of texture. This is a Tibetan banner showing the texture. Tagore, we know, wrote plays. He started writing of his life when he was just very young. He was a playwright, an actor, director, producer. Till death he was interested in writing plays, performing, and so far as drama is concerned, play is concerned, it's very rich, Tagore's plays. And there are so many varieties there. Ordinary plays, Giti-Natya as you call it, opera, then dance drama, Nritya-Natya, Chittangada, Shaman, so on. Now, this aspect of Tagore influenced some of his paintings. This painting, for example, looks like a particular scene of his play. This painting can be named a dramatic painting. That he has depicted so many paintings which can be called dramatic. We can't hear the dialogue only, but you can see the action. Expression of mood. Silence is the language of these paintings, mother tongue of these paintings. Nirabatai eder matri-bhasha. A little expressionistic. Now, use of, I've already said that Tagore was a modernist. Now, apart from detachment from literary associations, there are other symptoms of modernity. Now, use of line, or I should better say, free use of line. Lines are not conventional lines. Here, Tagore doesn't really, very rarely he gives lines. The lines which look like lines are not lines. They are paper white, not touched with color. Here and there are a few lines, but mostly the outline is paper white, not touched. Tagore was, yesterday I told you in my introduction to Tagore, he was in East Bengal, some of the East Bengal villages, to look after his father's estate. And there he came in contact, very, very close contact with the people of this home, the poor people, the oppressed, suffering humanity. In his short stories written during that period, Choto Golpo, we find depiction of their life, wonderful stories. Sometimes the life of landless labor is depicted. Tagore sees the thing, sees the system not from Zamindar's point of view, landlord's point of view, but it's just upside down. He looks at life from a landless labor's point of view. The torture, the tyranny, injustice, these things attracted his attention, and they are depicted not only in his short stories but also in his poems. I'm reminded of the famous poem written by Tagore, it is in the Chitra, Dui Big Hajumi. Now, here are some of the figures. Many faces. He came in contact with many people. He couldn't give expressions to them in his stories, but they had to wait. And when Tagore began to draw, began to paint, after say 30 or 40 years, they appeared in the canvas. Now here are some of the faces seen during Shilayadaho period, depicted here. The previous one, this one is a Dartington collection. I'm indebted to Mr. Elmhurst. He has very kindly given me some of the slides of the collections there. It is in my book, published. They have given me permission. Now, gradually Tagore came to, at the last stage, he came to abstraction. I don't mean to say that Tagore was an abstract artist in the sense the West uses the word today. No, certainly not. But in his paintings we find use of abstraction. Now, he began at the first stage as an abstractionist. In the manuscript pages we find abstract forms which do not depict anything we see in nature, but just dance of shape, dance of line, or dance of color even. But again he comes back to abstraction in the third phase, where I should not have said, use this word. He comes back. There is no coming back. One cannot really come back. History can never repeat itself. History doesn't repeat itself. It cannot simply. So Tagore didn't come back really, but a new development of abstraction we find in his third phase of creative activity. Abstraction means, well, simplification of forms. Then Tagore is an abstractionist. Just making the forms simpler, just to avoid unnecessary details, to get, as Clive Bell has said, to get the significant form. Now he tries to avoid irrelevant or unnecessary details to get the significant form. Now we come to faces, a part of the body.
Excuse me, just a quick consultation.
Yes.
Constraint problem. That's a
I'm just
closing this.
That's all.
Yes. Could come
So,
to the
yes.
point and close it. And then brief response.
Right.
Just mention that.
That's it.
And then to discuss over lunch.
I'm just nearing completion. I have a few slides now. We are coming to human faces, the most interesting part of the body. The eyes here are very important. Some decorative, some a little realistic. This is one of the most forceful expressions. This is by Emile Nolde, who is very close to Tagore. By Tagore. Bubbles taking shape of human face. nude is a famous branch of painting and sculpture in the West. Is a Greek statue, Matisse, Picasso, and Henry Moore. Tagore did some nudes. This is not a direct sketch, though it looks like. Expression of strength. Tagore was not really interested in the body only, but just a medium of expression of strength. Vast. Now we come to the last few faces, sad, sorrowful faces. These portraits remind us of the portraits done in words in his later novels, Duibon, Maloncho, Chokher Bali, Joga Joga, and so on. Self-portrait by Van Gogh. Tagore did some self-portraits. I'm coming to that. A few I have brought, 3 or 4. The first one, black and white, young Tagore. A little decorative, old Tagore. And the last 3. This in crayon. This also is in crayon, black and, it's not really black. And the last one, and the most famous one, the best one I should say, this painting, it has a name. And the name is known to us. The name of his famous poem, written in his early boyhood, Nirchharer Shapno Bhango, in Prabhat Sangit. The English name is The Awakening of the Waterfall. The waterfall taking shape of Tagore's face. It is coming out of the dark cave. Now, Tagore's creative genius was like that waterfall. It suddenly came into existence, came out of the cave, and like a volcanic eruption, it expressed itself. And as a result, we get 2,500 wonderful paintings which have brought modernity and richness in the realm of Indian painting. Thank you. I've taken a lot of time, sorry.
Not at all.
In fact, I felt it should go on, but some time limit.
Yes. As I told you before, that going through his painting is an act of discovery.